back with data which said not only yes, but hell yes. And the pioneers concluded, the Pioneer satellite data concluded. So, wow, astronomers were troubled by that. Whew. Could this thing be real? And well, what did they do? They sent out what they called an infrared astronomical satellite. I think they called it IRAS anyhow, and this was done in '83. They sent the IRAS out, taking infrared pictures all around the ecliptic, above and below. And apparently IRAS got 2 giant positive responses that yes, the 12th planet, the 10th planet, however you want to call it, yes, it's real. And that's when the lid slams down.
So it's out there, it's on its way back in, right?
According to the Sumerians in Sitchin, apparently it is. And if you're a student of history, as one of my majors, its last pass was 1600 BC. The Sumerians and Sitchin and all of those say it has an orbit of 3,600 years. Mm-hmm. So as like many of us, you know, I count on my fingers and toes and figure out, well, 1600 BC, it has an orbit of 3,600 years. Wow, it's due. Well, apparently it is.
So
now,
why are they keeping this a secret?
Because
you're an expert on secrets.
Listen, every time Nibiru would make a pass, it was not always devastating. Mm-hmm. It would depend on whether the planet Earth and Nibiru were on the same side of the sun at the same time. Mm-hmm. And if we were on the same side of the sun at the same time, all hell would break loose on planet Earth. Well, apparently the last pass triggered the explosion of Santorini, Thera, the volcano in the Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea, blew its top, brought to a close the great Minoan civilization. Among other things, it affected Egypt. It's all in the records, apparently. There are even historians and theologians who say that Santorini's explosion is exactly what you're reading about when the plagues and all hit Egypt that allowed Moses to get the Israelites out. But if you look at 1600 BC and figuring that was a relatively recent pass, it's due now, and apparently the guys in the astronomical observatories know it. And that, again, is above top secret. Let me give you a tiny example. For a number of years ago, there were 2 brilliant guys working at the Naval Observatory in Washington. Tom Van Flandern is one, who I hope you've interviewed.
No, but yeah, please continue, and we'd love to do
that. He's no longer with the Naval Observatory. The other one was a chief astronomer at the observatory, a brilliant man by the name of Robert Harrington.
Right. And
Harrington gave an interview to Zecharia Sitchin a number of years ago. I think it was 91 or so. Mm-hmm. Where he came right out and said, Dr. Sitchin, we are interested in this because it ties in perfectly with the work you've done on the Sumerians and the ancient planet Nibiru. He said, we found it, it's real, we have photographs of it, and he says from what we can put together, it's a rather nice planet. It's about 2.5 times the size of the Earth. Apparently it's heading toward the system, the center of the system. We've concluded about everything about it except that we haven't named it. And Zecharia spoke up and he says, it's already been named. He says, you simply call it Nibiru, as the Sumerians called it, the planet of the crossing. Mm-hmm. Well, Mrs. Sitchin and I were in agreement. I miss her. She died about a year ago. Mm. she was convinced that Robert Harrington had died because somebody bumped him off, because he had the courage to come out and give Zechariah this interview. I don't know whether you've seen it or not. It's on tape.
No, I haven't seen it, but we interviewed Lucas Scantamburlo about this subject, and he's also talked about Robert Harrington.
Yeah, well, Harrington gave the interview to Zechariah, and it's on a video called Are We Alone? And I think you can pick it up at the conference here next week.
Okay.
I have a copy, and I sent a copy to Neil Freer, who's a man you should interview.
Okay, well, we're in touch with Neil. He's a very interesting guy.
Oh, he's brilliant.
He's a brilliant guy.
He's brilliant. He just recently came out and admitted that he's had an intimate interrelationship with extraterrestrial intelligence since he was a child.
Well, he's always talking about the Anunnaki. I do know this.
Well, he wrote a book called Breaking the Godspell. And he has supported Zechariah's work for years.
I have a question, Bob, if I may, about the provenance of this information, in the sense that Zechariah Sitchin's work is very well documented, and a lot of people watching this video will be very familiar with his books and with all the intelligent commentary about that. Are you saying that you have additional information based on your contacts within the Old Boys Network, or are you doing a neat presentation of...
Many of my conclusions are my own, you know, and they, in many respects, correlate perfectly with Sitchin's work, which is, you know, Neil has told me, he says, you know, Zechariah really should get the Nobel Prize. But I don't know what they would grant it to him in what field. But he's such an outstanding scholar in what he's done, and the Earth Chronicles is what he calls all of his work. Well, I think there's 7 or 8 of them now.
I have 2 questions. One's a minor one to do with celestial mechanics. And it's just something that I've never understood, and I've heard this question from many other people as well. That if Nibiru comes from the outer reaches of the solar system, it's going to be an icy rock, which isn't going to be the kind of place that any beings could live on or would want to live on. And researcher Andy Lloyd, who you probably have heard about, has theorized that what they're seeing in the photographs that you referred to as an orange object is actually a brown dwarf, with the possibility of Nibiru being one of its moons, if you like. And there's a lot of debate about how to apply what Sitchin seems to have been saying to the real practicalities of life on an icy rock out in the orbit of Pluto. And I wondered if you knew or had anything to say about that.
No, it's not an icy rock. And yes, when it makes its long journey out and back, it gets so far away from the sun that the sun is probably no more than a little tiny prick of light, a little tiny pinpoint. And if you would think that it would be naturally icy cold. No, apparently the planet, like many planets in the system here, generate its own heat. It has in its core a generating heat system very much like our own. We have a system within the core of this planet that has been described as a thermonuclear reaction, very similar to the sun. Now, most of the life and all of the bounty and all of the beauty of life on this planet comes from our going around this beautiful sun. But I don't think Nibiru is an icy rock. No, I think, first of all, that it probably generates enough of its own heat, and I think they probably did indeed create for themselves, with the advanced technology that they have, a kind of a Dyson sphere. Are you familiar with that? Mm-hmm. You know what? Brilliant British astronomer, I think, Freeman Dyson, said some years ago that an incredibly advanced technology will have the ability to enclose its planet and retain not only its heat, but its atmosphere. And I suspect that the Anunnaki have